19.8 Weber on power. Weber deals power primarily in the context of society and state. Weber defines power as the probability that an actor will be able to realize his own objectives against opposition from others with whom he is in social relationship. This is a broad definition. His definition of domination is more specific. It refers only to those cases or exercises of the power where an actor obeys a specific command issued by another. In making the distinctions between power and domination, Weber put forward two types of solutions to the problem of order. Power represents action likely to succeed even against the opposition and resistance of those who is applied. The situation is typically found in a warfare and class conflict, but it has the limitation of being usable as long as the term source of order. Legitimate dominations, by contrast, involves an element of voluntary compliance from those to whom it applied and therefore embraces the issues of meaningful action. Domination can be legitimized in terms of the appeal to the different principles, namely tradition, national legitimacy, legality as embodies enacted law, and charisma. Weber's concept of class, status, and party, along with his analysis of state and bureaucracy, are the center of his concept of power. Each group is focused around or oriented towards power as an independent point of conflict. Each represents an aspect of and as a basis for power. Let us discuss each of them in detail. Weber's discussion of class, status, and party are three different dimensions of stratification in society, each of which conceptually separate from the others, and specifies that on an empirical level each may usually influence each of the others. Weber did not ignore economic sources of power and considered these to be among the more important sources, especially in capitalism. But unlike Marx, he claimed that power did not emerge only for economic sources, and he certainly does not restrict power relationships to ownership or non-ownership of the means of production. Power can also emerge from status of party or party associations concerned with acquiring power, or can also be pursued for its own sake. Among these different forms of power, there are cross-cutting influences and effects, so that power obtained in one of these spheres may lead to power of change in situations in another sphere. For Weber, class is an expression of economic order. To be more precise, it's determined by a person's market situation. Here, a class denotes an aggregate of individuals who shares the same class situation. So as per the indications of class situations with the market situations, there could be as many class division as there are minute gradation of economic position. But similar to Marx, Weber also argues that the ownership versus non-ownership of property is the most important basis of class division in a competitive market. Weber distinguishes two types of classes: positively privileged class, who are the proprietary property owners, and acquisition of commercial class. He also identifies middle class, a group that can be placed between these two. From his property or the lack of property is the basis of all classes situation. He also distinguished social class, which is composed of the plurality of the class statuses between which an interchange of individuals or a personal basis or in the course of generation is readily possible, typical, observable. For Weber, power is associated with property class in terms of that they enjoy more status and privilege in the society. The acquisition classes are in a negatively privileged situation, and they are workers of the various principal types. They are less powerful in the society. Social mobility is possible between different classes or strata in the society, but this movement is possible only to a limited extent according to Weber. He says moving into a wider range of position is blocked by power differentials between different classes. Box 19.4 Characteristics of status groups. Since Weber rejects the notion that economic phenomena directly determine the nature of human ideals, he distinguished such conceptualizations independent of class interest, and hence the distinction of status groups from class groups. By status situation, Weber refers to that part of a person's life chances which are decided by the social esteem in which he or she is held. Such esteem might be positive or negative. The status situations of an individual refers to the evaluations which other make of an individual or her his social position, thus attributing to her or him some form of social prestige or esteem. A status group is number of individuals who share the same status situations. They normally manifest their distinctiveness through following a particular lifestyle and through placing restrictions upon manner in which others may interact with them. It is a system of stratification. It's a system of stratification that the status groups are amorphous through though they are conscious in and of themselves. Along with the social esteem, there occur these status groups are amorphous through though they are conscious in and of themselves. Along with the social esteem, there occurs a specific lifestyle and restrictions, and this becomes the characteristic of particular status group. In Weber's view, class distinction and status distinction remained separable in analysis and in fact, but they were also linked and they are moved across each other in patterned ways. Weber considered both class and status group membership as basis of social power, but the formation of political party has more influence upon power. For Weber, a party refers any voluntary association which has the aim of securing directive control of organization in order to implement certain definite policies within the organization. Parties are organizations rather than communities or groups, and they are striving for a goal in a planned manner. Weber notes that classes are in the economic order, status groups in the social order, and parties in the sphere of power. In some senses, power is not a separate order, in that classes and status groups are concerned with the power. The difference between parties on the one hand and status groups and classes on the other hand is in the level of analysis. Parties are organizations, whereas classes and status groups are grouping of people. If status groups or classes become well organized, they may form party, or their parties may become the organizational wing of the class or status group. Trade unions, professional association, ethnic groups, and religious institutions are examples. Parties represents power at the macro level when it comes to his perceptions of power at macro level. His conception of power and domination are closely associated. He distinguishes between these types of domination: charismatic, traditional, and legal rational. In charismatic leadership, the basis of power is the charisma of the leader. The term charisma is applied to a certain quality of an individual personality by virtue of which he is set apart from the ordinary individuals and treated as endowed with the supernatural or specifically exceptional powers and qualities. In traditional dominations, the basis for power is age-old traditions, but patriarchalism is a good example of traditional dominations. The basis of power in legal rational domination is legitimate law. For Weber, all three, class, status, and party, are sources of power. Thus, his view of power is extensive, cutting cross-country social and political parameters. 19.9 Parsons on power. Parsons regards power as something processed by the society as a whole. As such, power is generalized facility of source in the society. It is the capacity to mobilize the resources of the society for attainment of the goals for which a general public commitment has been made. In this sense, the amount of power in society is measured by the degree to which collective goals are realized. Thus, the greater the efficiency of a social system for achieving the goal defined by its members, the more power exists in society. This view is known as a variable sum concept of power, different from the Weberian and Marxian constant sum concept and power. Since power in society is not seen as fixed as contrast, instead it is variable in the sense it can increase or decrease. Parsons' view of power is developed from his general theory of the structure of nature of society. He believes that the order, stability, and cooperation in society are based on values concerns. That is a general agreement by members of society concerning what is good and worthwhile. He assumes that this value consensus is essential for the survival of social system. From shared values desires the collective goals, that is goals shared by members of society. For example, if materialism is a major value of the Western industrial society, collective goals such as economic expansion and higher living standards can be assumed to stem from this value. The more able Western societies are also to realize these goals, the greater the power that resides in the social system. Steadily rising living standards and economic growth are therefore the indications of an increase of power for the society as a whole. Parsons' view of power differentials within society also derives from his general theory of social system. He argues since goals are shared by all members of society, power will generally be used in the furtherance of collective goals. Thus, for Parsons, power is an integrated phase in the social system, just as social stratifications. Parsons argues that there was a value consensus is an essential component of all society. It follows that some form of stratifications result from the ranking of individuals in terms of common values. Thus, those who perform successfully in terms of society values will be ranked highly and according high prestige and power. Second, they exemplify or personally become common values. As persons, a functionalist believe that this is different distributions of power and prestige among the members of strata society is just right and proper since they are basically an expression of shared values. The Parsons view relationship between the social groups in a society as one of cooperation and interdependence rather than a conflict and confrontations, particularly in complex industrial societies. Different groups of specialists in particular activities. As no one group is self-sufficient, it cannot meet the needs of its members, and hence each group enter into interaction with other groups of exchange of groups and services, which make the relationship between the different social groups of reciprocity. This relationship extends to the top of the stratus in a stratification system in individual societies which exhibit high specialized division of labor. Some members will specialize in organizing and planning. Those who govern other will follow their directions those who governed. Parsons argues that this inevitably leads to the inequality in terms of power and prestige. Box 19.5 Power and Prestige. Parsons argues that the inequalities of powers are based on shared values. Power is legitimate authority in that members of society as a whole generally accept it as just and proper. It is accepted as such because there are positions of authority use their own power to pursue collective goals which derive from the society's central values. Parsons views power and prestige differential associated with social stratification both inevitable and functional for the society. It is the inevitable because it is derived from shared values which are necessary part of all social system. It is functional because it serves to integrate various social groups. Parsons' later work on power involved a conscious modification of his previous views. Giddens 1995. In his later works with criticizing C.W. Mill's power theory, Parsons viewed power as generated by social system in such a the same as wealth was generated in this productive organization economy. The parallel which Parsons developed between power and money were based upon the supposition that each had similar role in the two of the four functional systems of social system involved by Parsons. Power for Parsons is a direct derivative of authority. Authority for him is institutionalized legitimations which underweigh power and was defined as the institutionalism of rights of leaders to expect support from the members of the collectivity. By speaking of binding obligation, Parsons deliberately brought the legitimations into various directions, resignation of power, so that for him there was no such thing as illegitimate power. Reflections, Actions 19.5 outlined the Parsons' view of power and state and power. Parsons stated that the power of power is only one among the several different ways in which one party might secure the compliance of another as to decide to cause the action. Persons say compliance can be secured by applying a positive reward or negative coercion sanction, but in most of the cases when power was being used, there was no overt sanction, either positive or negative. Employed persons argue it was particularly necessary to state that the use of power should not be identified directly with the use of force. 19.10 Other theoretical models on state and power. The state and power, both concepts essentially are contested concepts. There are a number of sociological theories, models of state and power, each offering different accounts for its origin, development and impact of liberal theory, plural theory, allied theory, neo-Marxist, anarchist theories are some of the theories explained here in brief. The liberation theory of the state dates back to the writings of the social contract theorists such as Hobbes and Locke. These thinkers argued that the society had risen out of voluntary argument or a social contract made by the individuals who recognized that only the establishment of a sovereign power could be safeguarding them from the insecurity, disorder, brutality of the state of nature. Here, the state is a natural arbitrist amongst competing groups and individuals in society capable of protecting each citizens from the encroachment of his own fellow citizens. The state is therefore a neutral entity acting in the interest of all and representing what can be called the common good or public interest. The liberal theory has been elaborated by modern writers into a pluralist theory of state. Pluralist theory argues that the political power is dispersed among a wide variety of social groups rather than an elite of ruling class. It is decentralized, widely shared, diffused, and fragmented, deriving from many sources. Arnold Ross, Peter Bentley, Robert Dahl, Talcott Parsons, Neil Meltzer are some of the key pluralist theories. Robert Dahl, an advocate of this theory, also termed rules by many as polyarchy. According to pluralist perspective, competitions between two or more political parties is an essential features of representative government. According to pluralist, interest groups and pressure groups representing various interests play a major role in affecting the decisions-making process of society. Pluralists believe that roughly equality exists amongst organized groups and interest in that each enjoys some measure to access the government, and government is prepared to listen impartially to all. They claim that the competition for office between political parties provided the doctrine with an opportunity to select its leaders and a means of influencing government policy. Pluralist theory explains the origin of liberal democratic state. Pluralist state represents institutionalized power, an authority, and it is in the supreme guardian of representative democracy in the state in the modern society. The primary task of state is to balance interest of multitude of competing groups representing interest of society as a whole and coordinating other major institutions. They view the state itself as a set of competing and conflicting institutions rather than the monolithic entity which exerts its power over the rest of the society. They argue that power exists only in situations of observance, conflicts, and that people's interests are simply where these overt preferences are revealed. An alternative neo-pluralist theory of the state has been developed by writers such as J.K. Galbraith and Charles Lindblom. They argued that the modern industrial state is both more complex and less responsible to power pressures than the classical pluralistic modern suggest. According to the meaning to democratize is challenged from one of the direct popular roles to that of competitions between and within the elite to control the states. They argue that elites are not mingle integrated group but multiple centers of political powers. Neo-pluralist see elites, especially corporate elites, as having a greater degree of influence than other groups on government, state policy, and it may constrain the effective influence of other interest groups. The elite theory of state argues that all societies are divided in two main groups, the ruling and the ruled. The classical elite theorists such as Wilfredo Pareto, Gandino Mosca, and Robert Michaels argues that the political power always lies in the hands of a small elite, and the egalitarian ideas such as socialism, democracy are a myth. Elite theorists are concerned with the questions of how and why it is that a minority always rule over the majority, a fact which is as inevitable in any society. According to them, social power is concentrated in elite groups who control resources of key social institutions, and regardless of how democratic a society may be, elite hold the bulk of power, use all of any means of power, and power becomes end in itself. Pareto places particular emphasis on sociological characteristics as the basis of elite rule. He argues there are two main types of governing elite, which he calls lions and foxes. Lions achieve power because of their ability to take direct and decisive actions, and they tend to rule by force. Military dictatorship provide an example of this type of governing elite, where the fox rules by cunning and guile, by diplomatic manipulation and will dialing. Major change in society occurs when one elite replaces another, a process which Pareto calls circulation of elites, and he believes history is a never-ending circulation elites. From him, state is a tool in the hands of ruling elite. He saw modern democracies as mere another form of elite dominations. Box 19.6 Rule by a minority. Gondano Musk believed that rule by a minority is an inevitable feature of social life. He claims that in all societies, two classes of people appears, a class that rules and class that ruled. The first class, always the less numerous, performs all political functions and monopolizes power and the advantage that the power brings, whereas the second, the more numerous classes, is directed and controlled by the first. He viewed that there are important differences between democracies and other forms of rule. By comparison with the closed system and such a class and feudal societies, the ruling elite is in democratic societies is open. There is therefore a greater plausibility of an elite drawn from a wide range of social background. As a result, the interest of various social groups may be represented in the decision taken by the elites. The majority may therefore have some control over the government of societies. C. Wright Mills explains elite rule in institutional terms. He argues in his social model of power, the power elite, that the structure of an institution is such that the top of the institutional hierarchy largely monopolizes power. According to him, American politics was dominated by big business and military, commonly referred to the military-industrial complex, dictate the government policy. He claimed that the picture of the United States of America as a democratic pluralist society characterized by decentralized decision making and the separation of powers was false. Beneath the cover of continuously, there was in reality a unified class or power elite which could always get into the way of important decisions. The personnel of this elite were drawn from three interlocking elements in American society: business, politics, and military. Michaels took the concentration of power in the hands of an elite to be a necessary outcome of complex organization. His famous iron law of oligarchy states that in modern societies, parties need to be highly organized and so inevitably become oligarchic. Being hierarchically run by personal leaders and bureaucracy such that the bulk members are excluded from decision making. The classical Marx stresses the coercive role of the state, but neo-Marxists took account of the apparent legitimacy of the bourgeois state, particularly in the light of achievement of universal suffrage and the development of the welfare state. Antonio Gramsci and Louis Althusser influences post-Marxism to a great extent. According to Antonio Gramsci, in the modern conditions, it is the particular political party which forms the states. He was an advocate of arbitrary theory of state. He emphasized that the degree to which the domination of the ruling class is achieved not only by open coercion but is also elicited by consent. He argued that the ideological and political superstructures are relatively autonomous of the superstructure. He believed that the bourgeois had established hegemony, ideological leadership or domination over the proletariat, and insisted that the state played an important role in this process. By hegemony, a key term propounded by Gramsci, he means the way in which the dominant class gains consent for its rule through compromises and alliances with some class fractions and the disorganization of power of others, and also the way in which it maintains the rule is a stable social formation. According to him, hegemony is gained in the first place in civil society, where ideology is embodied in communal forms of life in such a way that it becomes the take of granted common sense of the people. For him, all the relations of civil society involved issues of power and struggle, not just class relations. The French Marxist Louis Althusser gives a functionalist interpretations to the Marxian conception of state. Although he viewed the state as a relatively autonomous of the economic base, for him the state is fully impacted in the logic of capitalism, where it functions to produce the mode of production. He added, since the capitalistic mode of production requires the state to produce its conditions of existence, where there is a reciprocal determination between the economic and political levels. Reflections and Action 19.6 examine how pluralistic and elitist differs in their deliberation on state and power. Although the neo-Marxist theory goes elaborations in seeing the state as an arbitrator, it nevertheless emphasizes the class character of the modern state by pointing out that it operates in the long-term interest of capitalism and therefore perpetuate a system of unequal class power. Anarchists condemned the state power, and they believed that this power and all form of political authority are both evil and unnecessary. They view the state as a concentrated form of oppression. It reflects nothing to more than the desire of those in power, often loosely reflected to a ruling class, to a subordinate other from their own benefits. 19.11 Conclusion. This unit familiarizes the conceptualization of state and power as done by Karl Marx and Max Weber and other thinkers. Marx had explained the concepts of state and power on the basis of dialectical materialism and antagonism of classes. Economic activities like modes of production, means of production, and distributions formed the core idea of Marx for explaining those states. Marx emphasized the role of economic power, and he argued those who control the economic power do command the superstructures of the society. Weber defined the state as a human community that claims legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. He explained how the state acquired legitimacy to use power. He gave primacy to a bureaucratic for deciding the affairs of the states and stressed rationalization for the legitimate use of authority within the state. Weber closely linked power with legitimacy. To him, class, status, and party are three dimensions of stratifications in society. Unlike Marx, Weber did not give much emphasis on economic phenomena. He distinguishes between charismatic, traditional, and legal rational types of domination. The unit also briefly looked into how the concept state and power are deliberated in functionalist and other theoretical modes such as liberation, pluralist, neo-Marxist, and elitist. 19.22 further reading. The books are Parsons and the classical social theory and introductions to Marx, Weber and Simmel. Bentex 1977, Marx, Weber, an intellectual portrait, University of California Press. Marx 1994, Weber, political writings, Cambridge University Press, UK. 19.13 references. Political theory and traditional modern theory. Politics, sociology and social theory encounter with classical and contemporary social thoughts. Power in contemporary political theories, practices and globalization. Hamilton Peter 1983, Talcott Parsons, Thatri Stock, publications. Sociology, themes and the perspective of universal, Tutorial Press Limited. And political theory and introduction is Palgrave. Classical social theory and introduction to Marx, Weber and Simmel, Oxford University Press. Max Weber, Politics and Spirit of Tragedy. Theory and Methodology on Sociology, Building and Solomons Limited, London. Calvade, ACF, Parker S. Power, Politics and Organization in Behavioral Science, View, New York, John Whaley and Sons. Contemporary Political, Social, Globalization, Politics and Power, Blackwell Publishers, UK. Lessman, Peter 2000, Thus the Rule of Man Over Man, Politics, Power and Legitimations in Capitals, Mark, the New York American, and Frederick Engel, the Germany Ideology, Moscow. And Miller, Richard Miller, Princeton, NJ, Princeton University Press. Parsons T. 1960 on Concepts of Political Party in Turn, Brains 199. The Contact, the Telecott Parson Reader, Blackwell, UK. The Distribution of Power of an American Society, Weber and Individual Portrait, University Press, Emily Durkheim. Introductions to four major works, Roland S. Turner, 1991, Talcott Parsons, Theoristic and Modernity, Sage Publication, London. Many books are a very short introduction to Oxford University Press, okay, and then Social Theory and Blackwell Publishers, UK, the Talcott Publications Reader, Blackwell, UK, the Cambridge Companion to Weber, Cambridge University Press, and Weber Political Writings, A Capitalistic State, Marx's Ambitious Legacy in a Crawling Mark, The Communist Manifesto, New Interpretations, Edinburgh University Press, Edinburgh. Well, Jonathan Y. Reed, Max Today, Oxford University Press, Oxford. This is the end of the chapter 19.